All right, well, it's a little after 4:30, so let's get started. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Energy 101. We're so excited to have you here. I'm Megan Litweiler. I'm the Program Manager for Advanced Learning Initiatives at the Irving Institute, and we're really excited to have so many of you joining us right now. Thank you. I still see there are responses coming in the chat, so thank you for that. And we're sorry that we could not do this in person as we planned. And as soon as we can, we really want to find a time to schedule our planned demo build and also to invite all of you into the new Irving Institute building to meet with us there. So stay tuned for that. But for now, we are here all on Zoom. And we're here today to answer your questions about this week's videos, which we hope you enjoyed. And I am delighted to be joined by several of our Irving Institute team members, and I'm going to give them all a chance to quickly say hi and introduce themselves before we get started. So Elizabeth, can we start with you?
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Wilson. I'm the director of the Irving Institute for Energy and Society and a professor in environmental studies, and I'll pass it to Amanda.
Hey folks, I am the academic director for the Irving Institute, and I get to work with Megan in all sorts of different programs. I'm the one who said I play with my dog. I have a greyhound to keep warm, and I'll pass it over to Stephanie.
Thanks, Amanda. Hi, everybody. I'm Stephanie Garcia, even though it says I'm the Irving Institute today, because I'm usually in the background to help with logistics. I'm the program coordinator, and we're happy you're here today. I'm going to pass it over to Kristen.
Hey everyone, I'm Kristen Miller. I am the operations manager for the Irving Institute. Welcome, glad to have you here. And Stephen, are you still on here somewhere?
I am. Thanks, Kristen. Hi, I'm Stephen Doig. I work on special projects and special advisor to the Institute, or another way to put it is jack of all trades.
All right, great. And I think we also have Angus with us too. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Of course. Hi, I'm Angus. I'm the undergraduate education and internship coordinator for the Institute. This is my third day of work, so I'm just here to get familiar with all y'all and learn a bit about what's going on. I think we have Elizabeth still has to introduce herself.
I think Elizabeth went first. So I think we're good. Thank you so much, and welcome to Angus. And again, welcome to all of you. So before we jump in, we're going to just do a few housekeeping items really quickly. So I just want to remind everyone, if you can, to please keep yourselves muted while you're not speaking. And we're going to be using the chat and hand raising functions to ask questions a little later. So if you're having trouble with any of that for any reason, please do let us know. And when we do open up the Q&A, please just keep in mind that this is an introductory course. So we're going to try to keep the questions focused on the material that we presented in the videos this week, so that our discussion is meaningful for everyone. And then also, we've created a document that we'll share with you, and I'm going to put that in the chat and share it with you right now. There we go. Okay, and so in this Google Doc, we have a list of all of the questions that were submitted in advance, and thank you to everyone who submitted your questions in advance. And so if you haven't submitted questions yet, you're welcome to add them to this document so that we can have a shared place where we have everyone's thoughts put together. However, when we do get to the Q&A, if you haven't submitted your questions in advance, we'll use the hand raising function to actually ask questions. And I'll explain that again when we get to the Q&A section. All right, now I'm going to pause just really quickly in case anyone has any questions about what we're doing today before we actually get started. And feel free to raise your hand. All right, great. Well, let us know if you do have any questions or need anything along the way. But we're going to kick off this session with a question for all of you. And we would love to know what the most interesting or cool or maybe surprising thing that you learned from this week's videos was. And to share your responses, we're going to open up a whiteboard, and I'll let Stephanie launch that and give you some instructions. So go ahead, Stephanie.
Awesome. Thanks, Megan. So I hope everybody can see the whiteboard now on your screen. If you go up to the top of your screen where it says you can see the Irving Institute screen, to the right, there's a little, it says view options with a little down arrow. And if you click that, you go down to annotate, you should be able to type and draw all over my screen. And if you can't for some reason, please just feel free to add any responses right into the chat.
Megan, can you remind us what the question is that we're responding to?
Yes, of course. I was just typing it into the chat too as you were saying that.
Okay.
Yeah. So the prompt for this was, tell us what something interesting or cool or exciting or meaningful that you took away from this week's videos. Lots of great responses coming in. Thank you. Things about energy justice and there's energy challenges around the world. Yeah, more than 1 billion people don't have access to energy. All right, great. Well, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts in this. We'll give you another couple seconds to see if anybody else has some thoughts that they want to share up on the board here. All right, great. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts on this. This is great. And we can even keep that up for a second if people are still typing. But I do want to move on to our Q&A so that we have time to take your questions. And we've already had several really great questions submitted already. So before we get started, just a few things about how we'll handle the Q&A. So we're going to start off with some of the questions that were pre-submitted via email. And we're going to start focusing on the first two videos. So our introduction to energy and energy in society, the first videos with Amanda and Elizabeth. And then in a little bit, we will move on to energy justice. So if you have questions on that, hold on for just a little bit and we'll get to that in just a little bit. So let's jump in. I'm going to pull up our questions and let me know if anyone is interested in accessing that document and you're having trouble, let me know. But everyone, I see a lot of people in here, so that's great. So we're going to start off with a question that I believe is probably for Amanda. It's from the first video that you watched, and it's all about energy calculators. So the question is, do personal energy calculators send a message that individuals are to blame for climate change and should bear the responsibility of fixing it? So should there be more pressure on governments and corporations to reduce emissions as opposed to focusing on individuals?
This is a really interesting question. Thanks, Megan. And I think it's a great place to really dig in. It's really thoughtful. And so thank you for bringing it into the mix. And I'm going to invite Elizabeth and Stephen to weigh in on this one as well. I guess in my view, it's not necessarily an either or, right? I mean, I think that it's more of a both and. Yes, absolutely. Solving our energy situation, improving our energy systems, making them more sustainable, making them more environmentally friendly, making them more just, it absolutely invokes policy, right? But how do people influence policy? Where does policy come from, right? It comes from all of us trying to influence our policymakers, and so our knowledge matters, right? Our ability to appreciate, you know, our role in the mix and how that sort of translates up at scale, you know, matters in the policy process as well. So I guess I really see it as a both and I don't think that we were including energy calculators to suggest that it's all, you know, our own energy consumption that we're trying to tackle. We will absolutely be addressing the much bigger pictures as we go throughout the course. In fact, our final session will be Professor Wilson focusing on policy and policy innovation. So I really see it as a both and. Elizabeth and Stephen, I wonder if you want to comment quickly on that as well.
No, I really want to thank this question as well. And I've gotten in trouble sometimes because I remember talking once before about, you know, all these great initiatives that people were saying people should do, like ride your bike more or compost more, and how given the scale of climate change, they almost seem trivial. And that this is a larger systemic problem. And one of my colleagues who'd spent years working in an environmental defense fund was like, no. It's a both and, as Amanda said, because you need people to actually buy in. And his point was that sometimes screwing a light bulb into your house makes you believe in it. So then you start going to other meetings and you start caring and you start investing in other areas of your life. And so I think it's part of being an individual, but living in a complex society, appreciating that we are actors, but within larger institutions and larger structural constructs, and how challenging it is to do both together and how completely necessary it is. Stephen, do you want to add anything? I mean, Stephen lives in an off-the-grid, very, very cool house in Lyme and kind of walks the walk, I think, better than most people I know. So what are your thoughts on that, Stephen? Individual versus collective responsibility.
So I'm really keen, obviously, from what Elizabeth introduced me, of the energy efficiency and renewable energy side. But I think to build on what Amanda and Elizabeth had to say is that in the end, individuals only get choices if they have choices. So different kinds of power systems, different kinds of vehicles, et cetera. And those things get created by industry, by businesses. And so there's this very clear tie between what we all might want and for the future and now, what things we will need, whether it's more, higher energy on our electricity system or electric vehicles or lower carbon and recyclable products that we buy. And then really policy and government can help incent business to move in that direction. And we can reinforce that as individuals buying those products and services or foregoing them in a way that pushes things in the right direction. They all are all of a piece, in fact.
Great, thank you so much for that answer. That was a good question to start on. All right, so we have another question here. In the US, we are still 80 to 85% dependent on fossil fuels for energy. How up to date is that information? Is that statistic accurate?
Oh, Amanda's got to take this one. She loves her Sankey diagrams. Here you guys go. Sankey diagram time. Sankey diagram time.
Where is it? It is here. Okay, so here we go. All right, so this is the 2020 stats on energy consumption in the US. And what you'll see over here on the left is all the different sources of energy that we are using, right from solar right there up at the top, all the way down to petroleum down there at the bottom. And so if the total number of quads, that's the large unit that we're using for energy, is 92.9, and then you add up, maybe somebody can do the math faster than I can, but 31 quads for natural gas, 9 for biomass, 9 for coal, 4 for biomass, and 32 for petroleum. That's what, 62, 71, 75 quads out of 92 that we use in this country as of 2020 were fossil fuels. So yeah, we are still very heavily dependent on fossil fuels in this country.
One of the things that I love about this chart, and those of you guys taking ENVS 12, you've already seen it once this week, but is you can really see across different sectors. And so we've done a ton. And when you look at, the decarbonization of the electricity sector with a lot of other resources, but then you look at other sectors like transportation, and you're able to see that's where all the oil is going. And so thinking about it, not only from a perspective of just electricity, but really societal energy use. And Stephen, you've had more experience than the rest of us working with industrial energy use, which is particularly dependent on natural gas and also oil. Can you talk to that for a moment? Maybe you can even mention green hydrogen, which I know is a favorite of yours.
But I think the main thing to think about industry is things happen at very high temperatures often, or high pressures. And those conditions are hard to achieve, say, with heat pumps and other non-carbon ways of producing cold and heat. And so right now there's a big effort into what Elizabeth said is I have a keen interest in green hydrogen. That's hydrogen made from renewable energy, because not only could it maybe power vehicles or power plants, but more importantly, it can address some of the biggest carbon emitters in the world, such as ammonia production for food production, shipping, and things like that, as well as taking out, making it possible to make steel without emitting carbon. And so it's a place where we actually have to come up with a different set of solutions and incentives in order to get very, very large and very, very expensive industry and equipment to move to something new. And so it's an area where interestingly, I would say it's the most bullish I've been in years on what industry can do to transform and to take advantage of new forms of energy, such as hydrogen.
Great. All right. Thank you, everyone. Let's move on to the next question here. And we have a couple of questions that are directed at you, Elizabeth, that focus on the difference in energy transitions around the world. And so folks are wondering, from your perspective, and from a global perspective, if you can tell us a little bit more about, what the most pressing transition challenges are globally, and then also, what that looks like in terms of centralized initiatives and also local initiatives that people should be pursuing to help us move transitions forward.
No, I really love this question, because I think the reason we have an institute here on energy and society is we really appreciate that where you sit is where you stand. And if you're in part of the world that has no electricity and very little energy use, your orientation is get more. I was a Peace Corps volunteer in Burundi, which still today only has 9% of the population electrified. I mean, the challenges there are very, very different than if you're in Hanover, New Hampshire, and we're worried about how to change our current system current system to a way to make it more sustainable. One of the reasons I love teaching at Dartmouth is because we have students from all over the world, and they bring perspectives from different parts of the world. They bring perspectives from different regions and different challenges. And so when we're thinking about those energy challenges going forward, I have one slide that I'm going to share with you. And this is just how I think about it. So there's about 2 billion of us in the world. Those are most of the industrialized countries in Europe and in the US and big parts of Asia, where we have, I always joke, kind of too much energy. And then there's another 1 billion people in the world that don't have any access to electricity, about 2 to 3 billion more that don't have access to clean cooking fuels. But then about 4 billion in the middle that don't have enough energy. And when I say enough energy, my former colleague at University of Minnesota, Suraj Dopla, his uncle had a factory in India that had to close on Tuesdays because they didn't have enough power. And there's parts of the world where power outages are very regular and where you can turn the light switch on, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you get light. And these are the parts of the world that are building and needing more energy to fulfill their life services. And how that is working is going to be what's shaping global emissions in the decades to come. So the two blue boxes, the goal is to decarbonize societies that, I mean, I have an electric toothbrush, that use energy for all kinds of things that we never did. The one in the middle provide basic services, but then those four in the middle, that's where the demand growth for energy is really driving global investments and global decisions all around the world. And when you're interested in these things from a local level, where so much of the change happens, where all the adaptation happens, it's easy to get focused where you are. But I just want to challenge all of us to also think about that kind of, lens back and kind of what these challenges are globally too.
Thank you, Elizabeth. All right. So we have one more question we'll ask quickly from the pre-submitted questions, but if anyone else has questions about the first two videos, please go ahead and raise your hand. You can even enter it in the chat if that doesn't work for you, and we'll get to you in just a moment. All right.
Ooh,
So
there's a question in the chat I can answer.
Take it away, Amanda.
So Lisa asks, what is rejected energy from the slide on estimated US energy consumption? Great question. And next week, one of the videos that that you're being asked to watch is actually a video from Lawrence Livermore National Labs that will break down that Sankey diagram that I showed you. And it's actually a really nice short discussion, very, very informative. Rejected energy is energy that is not actually used for the service that you're providing. And so when you drive a car, there's a percentage of that fuel that is actually helping you to move the car forward, right? But a lot of that energy that's in the car may be wasted as heat, right, or in friction, right? And so not all of the energy that's actually being used is going toward the actual service, right, that you want to get from the car. You're typically not trying to keep yourself warm by having your car going. You're typically trying to move from one place to the other, but it does create there is waste in the energy system just based on the laws of thermodynamics, right? And so that's a big portion of what we're talking about with rejected energy. Elizabeth, anything to correct on me on that? Did I get my physical systems interpretation correct?
Well, one of the things that I love about it when I think about it from the electricity space is you can think about losses across the system, right? So the wind is blowing through your wind turbine, you're losing some energy as it then becomes electricity. You're burning coal as you're going from spinning your turbine to creating electricity, you're losing energy there. You're transmitting it across the transmission and distribution networks, there's losses there. And then when you get to your home, I mean, you're bringing energy in, but your washing machine, your refrigerator, every place you're using energy isn't 100% efficient. So the losses are kind of part of how we do it. And that, I think, is one of the pieces that we always talk about I mean, Stephen, you always quote Amory Lovins and his great quote about, what people really want are warm showers and cold beer, and that people want energy services. No one wants energy. They want to be able to go visit their family and their friends. They want to be able to go get their COVID test. Just kidding. No one really wants that. But they want to be able to live their lives and have a time where they have enough food. They want to cook their food and share it with people. They want to live in places where they're comfortable. They want to be able to go visit people. And energy lets those things happen in this world we live in now, like it has not happened in the last 10,000 years of human history, right? I mean, now this is as good as it gets, guys. I mean, the fact that we're able to be here now in the middle of a pandemic together talking about this because we have this crazy electricity that lets us power our computers and power our great virtual communications, that's the crazy part. I mean, this is the anomaly. And so when you think about all of the things that energy allows us, whether it's clean drinking water, whether it's the ability to fly to see our grandparents over the holidays, I mean, it's kind of incredible. So I'm continuously in awe of the system that we've built, and I hope you appreciate that the National Academy of Engineers a few years ago had, the grid as kind of the innovation of the century. that has really transformed how humans live, not only in this country, but around the planet.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
And of course, it's caused lots of problems, which we'll get into next in the energy justice section.
Yes, absolutely. Which we're going to move on to shortly to make sure we have time to answer some questions about that as well. But if we have time, we can come back to this topic as well. But we have a couple more minutes to stick on this topic, and I don't see any hand raised, so I'll ask this last one from the pre-submitted questions, which was directed at something that Amanda mentioned in her video, where she said, even though we all use and interact with energy throughout our daily lives, we don't really think about it that often. But should this be the case? Should we really need this Energy 101 to introduce us to a hidden, inscrutable, but omnipresent infrastructure? So is it important for energy systems to kind of present themselves so that they are more thought of? And how can we reform energy systems to be more noticeable and understandable? So Amanda or anyone else, do you have some thoughts on that question before we move on to energy justice?
Yeah, that's another interesting and kind of philosophical question, right? About sort of the nature of being, right? Should the energy in the energy choices that we make be active choices or passive choices, right? And there are in the context of teaching and learning about energy, and the context of some energy systems, right? There's a lot of folks who really are trying to develop energy systems that will take the human out of it, right? And so the energy system for example, the built environment will make the best and most efficient choices for you, right? And if they're doing it right, you'll be comfortable, you'll have your energy services needs met, and you won't need to fuss with the energy system at all, right? So there's absolutely a school of thought, right, in an approach that says, let's take the people out of it and make it as easy as possible. As an educator, right, and as somebody who believes in active learning, right, and who believes in active citizenship, right, I see lots of value, right, in us being aware about the implications of our choices, right, and recognizing when we're making choices, right. Power to the people is sort of my sort of approach to the philosophy in this question. And so I guess my response to the question is, it kind of depends, right, on your belief in humanity, right, and whether you think that people can conquer or not. And I think the answer is probably somewhere in between. Frankly, that's a question that I would really be interested in your perspectives on, right, and what others think, not just sort of my opinion on it. So that could be a subject of an interactive blog at some point. But that's my take. I welcome anybody else to speak up on that, frankly.
I don't know. Do you think that we have a responsibility to understand the critical infrastructures that support our lives? I mean, to some degree.
Well,
like, I mean, we have civics classes in high school, and we want people to know how to punctuate a sentence. Should we also want people to know about the critical infrastructures that allow them to? Dominic, what do you think?
Well, Dominic
Unmute.
asked a question, I think.
Then he's got some ideas on this. Come on, let's hear it from the source.
Yeah, so I asked the question, and I'll be
brief.
Introduce yourself. Yeah, I'm Dominic. I'm a Thayer master's student. I was also an undergrad, graduated in 2019, took a few years off, and I'm very happy to be back in Hanover. I was doing some writing in India. I was in India until COVID travel restrictions were put in place, writing about politics and technology. So I'm very curious about these sorts of questions that examine the interactions between humans and technical systems, for example. And I've been working with the capabilities approach recently as a way to approach questions of energy justice and how we might design systems that are just. And I've been delving into this huge energy justice literature. And Amanda, some of your suggestions have been really helpful in that. And increasingly, the way that I think about just energy systems is it's really important for people to be involved in systems to sort of have this understanding of critical infrastructure for two reasons that I think about. One is instrumental, and that's how you progress towards justice, is if we have people who can understand the systems and understand how to change them. So like people at Irving is a great example of like, we need people like you who understand what's going on and can teach us maybe so that we can be more involved in trying to change the systems and doing it in the right way, not just sort of flailing around and trying something that we don't have a good sense that will work. And then there's also an instrumental reason or an inherent reason that we might want to understand critical infrastructure. And that gets into some of the, I don't know, Amanda brought up the word philosophy, but the capabilities approach has some capabilities, some core capabilities that sort of address this need to understand critical infrastructure. And I think that's something that probably people in the engineering school, but all around Dartmouth understand, that being able to interact with systems, understand the world around you, and maybe even influence them is really inherently meaningful. So, yeah.
Thank you, Dominic. I don't know if anyone has anything else to share on that quickly, but that was a really good segue to moving on to energy justice, which we're going to be talking about next. So we have time to take your questions on that. But first, we wanted to give all of you a chance to talk with each other about this topic. So we're going to do a really quick breakout group. And in the group, we'll just go in for about maybe 7 minutes, and we'd like you to discuss what stood out to you the most in the energy justice video that you saw. Is there anything that really resonated with you or made you think differently about the social justice aspects of our energy services? So again, we'll give you some time in your groups to talk about that. And while you're in there, we'll send you a message that has that prompt again. So I'm going to have Stephanie go ahead and send you into the breakouts, and we'll see you back here shortly. I hope that you had some good discussions in the breakout group and that it kind of gave you some good food for thought. We're going to turn back to the Q&A so that we have a chance to answer any questions, and maybe some more came up now that you've had a chance to connect with each other. So again, I'm going to go into our pre-submitted questions. But if anyone has any questions that have come up and you didn't pre-submit a question, please feel free to raise your hand or put that in the chat, and we'll keep an eye on both. All right. So we're going to start off with a question here. So, which is, for power plants that have already been built close to communities of color or low income communities, how can we work to get these plants closed or more regulated? Is Amanda back?
I am back.
Oh, you are?
Yes, I am. But that's a big question. And I'm going to need help with that one, right? So, and I think too, let's think a little bit about the premise of the question, right? So, if the location of power plants and their impacts, right, in their neighborhoods. There is a strong and growing movement, right, in environmental justice and energy justice to ensure that the visibility of those negative health effects is increasing, right? There is a real need for shifting, if we can, the paradigm by which policy is made. Oh, bless you.
Sorry.
That's okay. By which policy is made and facilities are permitted, right? So to the degree that we can put pressure on those decision-making processes to increase the degree to which they are open and engaging of local stakeholders. I mean, this is one of the basic premises of procedural justice, right? Are the processes of decision-making by which those plants are operated, are those inclusive of everyone, and particularly of the people who are most closely affected, right? And so the places to look for how we can transform the relationship between local power plants and local communities, is on who's participating in the decision-making process. How can we participate more? How can we foster the capacity of local communities to be better equipped to participate in decisions that affect how those plants are operated, right? This is a core element of a number of energy and environmental justice movements. One place that I would suggest folks who want more info on that to look is the Initiative for Energy Justice, which has been based at Northeastern University, IEJ, which was founded by Shalonda Baker and her colleagues. Another is, oh, help me out, Megan, Tony at University of
I believe Tony Reams' lab is the Urban Energy Justice Lab.
Yes, Tony Reams. Thank you. REAMES at the Urban Energy Justice Lab at the University of Michigan. He's another scholar activist, right, to watch. So those are a couple of good examples of and there are many more of places that are working on this issue. Thanks, Megan, and thanks for the question.
Hey, thanks, and I'm going to put those couple of links in the chat in just a minute. So keep an eye on the chat, and I'll throw those in there, and we'll have those for you so you can check those out. Okay. All right, so moving on in our questions. So we have another question here. What does energy justice look like in the context of the Upper Valley? So where many of us are. So I'm curious what some of the issues are in terms of planning, weatherization, energy sourcing, or otherwise. I don't know if I think that Elizabeth might have had to jump off, but I mean, okay.
Yep.
But I know that Stephen is still here. So anyone who wants to jump in and answer that question, please feel free.
Again, that's a great question. And the one thing that I can actually point to is we have two professors in the anthropology department who are actually running an energy justice clinic that started this term and that's running this term and next term. So that's Doctors Marin Greenleaf and Sarah Kelly. And one of the energy justice projects that they're working on, that they're having students work on, is the connection between is connecting the Upper Valley and the Hanover and other rural communities who are interested in addressing the electricity, the fairness of electricity issues. So there's some local energy and activity happening in the Upper Valley. But in terms of the state of play of energy justice in the Upper Valley, I would need to brush up on that. I think that's a work in progress in terms of being able to characterize that more broadly. Stephen, I'd welcome any comments that you might have on that.
Well, I mean, it's a very broad topic, and I will not profess to be an expert up here in the Upper Valley, other than to reiterate, within more than a stone's throw, but not more than a 15 or 20 mile drive from Hanover, you will run into people with very, very different options and costs, percentages of their income, and really even just reliability of energy questions that they deal with. And certainly the power in the area I live in, though relatively wealthy, goes out quite frequently. And there are people this year with a spike in energy prices who will really be making decisions about food and staying warm. I would encourage people, just something that is relevant to the Upper Valley is the New Hampshire Electric Co-op. And for those of you who don't know the history of co-ops, they were founded in the 30s and 40s by communities, and they're community owned, member owned, and they provide power for themselves. And they strong aligned interest of the company and the production, and they benefit from it. So they try to keep costs down while serving their members as well as they can. And they really made a huge difference. And so anybody who doesn't know the world of rural electric co-ops in the US, it's a great story, and they're similar in other parts of the world.
All right, thank you for that. So we have a question in the chat too, which is a tricky one, asking, is the issue related to energy inequality better or worse than housing, healthcare, or educational inequality? I'm wondering if they're all connected.
I agree. This is a really interesting question. This could be another great breakout conversation to have, because I don't think that there's a yes or no answer to this question. I think that the comparatives that you're looking for here, housing, healthcare, and education, right? They are all fundamental aspects, right, of our modern life and well-being. And one thing that they have in common is that they are all powered by energy, right? So we need energy for embedded energy for the materials that our houses are actually made of, energy that keeps us warm and turns the lights on. Our modern healthcare systems are thoroughly dependent on energy. The healthcare system in general is waking up to the realization of how much energy it uses, and it's huge, right? And obviously, in the educational context, it's sort of the same embedded energy, but also energy to power our schools and our campuses. And so, is the issue better or worse in energy than it is in those things? I don't know the answer to that, but I do know that the fact that those systems depend on energy and we have those problems in the energy system that they rely on, puts, I think, a special emphasis on, if we're able to resolve, those issues in the energy system, then we are actually also helping to solve the issues, or creating a support system for those activities that may have a ripple effect.
Right,
Can I
thank
add
you.
something to that, Amanda?
Of course, please.
I agree with everything that Amanda said, and I would emphasize the interlinkage, not so much around the fact that you can't have a modern healthcare system unless you have energy, but really at the root of this is giving people fair access to services and goods that a great country would have. And so from my perspective, an interesting thing that's happened with energy in the last mostly 10 years, but it's been a long time coming, which is distributed energy is actually getting quite inexpensive. And the storage of it is getting quite inexpensive. And so that allows communities to say, well, we can power ourselves at reasonable costs, and we don't have to be beholden to other people. And I think that then ties into, well, so what does it take to have healthcare that's like that? How does it take to make sure we're all fed, educated fairly, and things like that? So I think the question is a great one, because to me, there's an interlinked set of things that you would say, oh, that's a modern, advanced, and fair society, whatever those attributes are, food and shelter and education and healthcare and services, and say, well, how do you wrap them together? And energy is quite central to it, as Amanda said, because it really allows many of these other things to happen. And it's had I think, a long history of being placed to detrimental to certain and usually disadvantaged societies in terms of health impacts and things like that. And so there's really a chance right now, which is the exciting part about the energy transformation, is to get it right.
Stephen, you mentioned distributed energy. Could you define that in your view? Because I think that, not only is that important from a energy transition, from a technological transition standpoint, but it actually really is important from a justice standpoint as well.
Yeah, sure. So the most modern electrical systems are built up in what's called a hub and spoke model. So you think about a bicycle wheel with spokes, and you build a centralized power plant, and it's usually quite large and somewhat fragile. And you then, and it's very expensive, and then you run wires out from it. And the further you get away from the hub, the more it costs, because you have more wires and less demand and all that. And that's been a model that was used all over the US. And then you connect them together, so you end up with a grid, but you still have these points of failure. These places like a nuclear power plant or a very large coal plant, if they go down, or several of them go down, or the wires that interconnect them go down in hot summer weather, then there can be a collapse of that. Today, we have a situation where you can produce electricity from wind and solar very, very cheaply It doesn't always blow, the wind doesn't always blow, and the sun doesn't always shine, but you can do that when it's running. And then it's getting ever cheaper to connect those together. And so you can imagine going from a hub and spoke model, a discrete set of really big power plants, to an interconnected web of power that's on people's rooftops, it's in fields, it's on wind turbines that are onshore and offshore, and you interconnect them in that way that there's no major point of failure. And this is, a critical opportunity, not just to actually reduce costs over time, reduce carbon footprint, but also to ensure that the power system is far more secure than it is today and far more resilient in the case of outages caused by nature or people.
Well, and the other aspect of it is that if you're talking about a small just system, a set of small distributed systems, you can also localize the decision making, right, about that system. And so it can be a smaller number of people making a decision together, as opposed to a corporate entity of some kind making a decision for thousands and thousands of people, right, that may not listen to them. So it's got both that technological side and the justice side. Thanks, Stephen.
And the last thing I'd say about that, Amanda, is that scale that you need is getting smaller and smaller by the day. And so I think, there's a time coming where even down to a town of 1,000 people, you could figure out ways to power yourself and then make very determined interlinkages to other towns to increase resiliency, because you have multiple points of energy being produced. So it's a very different way to think about power production and the use of it by people.
All right, thank you. We only have a few minutes left, but I do want to ask just one more question that maybe we can get a quick answer to, because I think it's a nice one to maybe wrap up on. And I'm sure these topics in energy justice are going to come up again and again as we progress through the course. So I hid it from myself. There we go. So are there any ways that colleges and universities can support the work of energy justice? Or maybe even, I'm going to add on to that, is there anything that, students can do at universities to support the work of energy justice?
Vote, participate, be active, make your voice heard, and listen for whose voice isn't heard, right? And make it heard. Right. And in particular, working to identify who's gaining, who's benefiting versus who's participating in the decision, and try to get those better aligned. And take the energy justice course in the spring.
Yes. Or Amanda's wonderful Coursera course, Energy Justice, is available as well.
Yes, there is a course you can take for free on energy justice. So go to Coursera and type in energy justice, and we're the only thing that you'll find.
All right, wonderful. Okay, well, we are just about out of time. So just a few things before we wrap up. So next week, we're going to be talking about how energy flows through society. You'll learn what a Sankey diagram is, which you just learned a little bit, but we're going to get deeper into that and understand why they're useful, and get into kind of the specifics of those diagrams. You'll also hear about the complex technical and social aspects of energy systems, and then how our use of various fuels is evolving over time. So these videos should now be posted, so you can go ahead and dig in when you're ready, and then we'll talk about those videos when we meet next week. Does anyone have any questions about the course or logistics or anything like that before we wrap up? Okay, I don't see any hands raised. All right, well, thank you all so much for coming. We're going to put up a slide as we close out. We have some other events and ways to participate. I just saw a question coming in. Yes, unfortunately, we will be on Zoom again for the remainder of the course. You can use the same link, but I'll send out reminders about that as well. And Amanda, I wonder if you could give us a little description of what some of these events that are coming up and ways to get involved in the Irving Institute.
Sure. So, excuse me. So tomorrow is the first in our winter series of Dartmouth Energy Collaborative Talks. our theme this winter is the road beyond COP26, right? So the climate negotiations that took place in Glasgow last fall. So we're kicking off to hear about the delegates from Tuck who were at the negotiations in Glasgow last fall, tomorrow at 12:10. And then that series will continue every 2 weeks or so with another talk. So keep an eye out for that. On Wednesday, the next in our series of new energy talks will happen. That is the series that we have, again, every couple of weeks. And that brings in scholars and practitioners, but mostly scholars, to tell us about their research in energy. And so sometimes those are at a little bit more of a technical level, but there may be something that you can glean from them. So check the titles for those when they come around. And I'm really interested to hear Vivek's talk on climate risk and uncertainty and how energy is in the mix there. So looking forward to that. And then finally, if you are a student, an undergraduate or a graduate student, we offer every term, we offer mini grants, and those can support research, they can support internships, they can support your own independent project or a learning opportunity. So the deadline is Wednesday, February 2 for the spring term round of mini grants. So let us know if you have questions, but go ahead and submit a proposal. There's more information on our website for that. So thanks again so much to everybody for being here tonight. It was really fun to see you all, and I look forward to seeing you next week as well. Thanks, Megan.
All right, thank you so much, everyone. It was great to see you, and we'll see you next week.
Have a great night. Stay warm, everybody.
Yes, and you'll hear from us via email in the meantime with updates. And please let us know if you have any questions. Thank you.
Super. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.